Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing, sir?
Hey everybody, I'm doing good. Reed, how about you?
Doing good. Always good to talk comics, and we're going to talk one of my favorite characters, Daredevil. Daredevil Born Again, season one. It's completed. It is over. We're going to talk about our thoughts on about the season. We're going to talk about where we thought it went, where it probably could have done better, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're hoping for season two. As a preface, we will spoil the show. We're going to go through it. It's all been released, so there will be spoilers with it, as well as we'll probably end up spoiling some of the stuff from the Netflix series if you haven't watched those. That's like 10
Oh,
years ago, old at this point, but we'll kind
we
of go
gotta
through.
watch those.
We just want to kind of give our thoughts on what we thought about the show. Did it live up to the legacy of Daredevil? Did it do some interesting things? What it failed on? So I'll kick it to you first, sir. I know you were a huge fan of the show. You're not as quite as huge a Daredevil fan as I am,
No,
but you
not
did love
nearly.
the show. You
Yeah.
watched this one. What did you think about what Disney put together for Daredevil Born Again?
I was very excited for the show. My son and I both love the original show as well as all the spin-offs with Netflix did such a good job on their superhero shows. Jessica Jones comes to mind. I know there's a lot of haters out there for Iron Fist, but me and Jackson, when he was like in junior high, or maybe he was still in elementary school, but he loved Iron Fist, and that was a really good show too. Um, that we watched the Defenders, we watched them all.
Yeah,
Um, and the Punisher, though, I didn't watch with him. The Punisher was a little bit.
a little too violent for Jax at
It
that age. Yeah.
was. Oh my god, that show was so violent. But anyway, we were very excited for this show to come out. No doubt about it. It had had a really high bar to reach. And I will say, episode one, I was really excited to see it. It was a good show. I was drawn into it immediately. But I know some other Daredevil fans besides you, Reed, who one in particular who was immediately turned off and said, "Hey, if Karen and Foggy are out, then I'm out too," and refused to watch the rest of the show. Nope, it's no good. Forget it. I'm not watching. It was shocking to see Foggy die, and it was shocking to see Karen Page missing throughout the whole show. She's there a little bit, and I think there, like episode 3 or 4, she showed up for a minute, or maybe it was a little bit later during the trial.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was very, very brief.
Very brief. You could tell that was forced in. You could tell. But when Karen Page was back for that last episode, it really felt like it had come full circle and the show was really starting to hit its stride. I felt it was a little bit wonky and from some respects, but I will tell you, as a fan of the original show, who has not watched the original show in several years, the reverberation of that greatness, kind of stayed the same. And then when this show came out, I was so excited to see it, and it was such good TV. It really, really was. Was it, and I always had to keep myself in check. Was it ever going to meet that bar of the previous show? Probably not. But it was a lot of fun to watch. I couldn't wait for the next episodes to come out. I know it was a little bit wonky, probably because of that whole rewrite that they did and that refilming that they
Yeah.
did. And so, there were some wonky parts. Why is Wilson Fisk out of prison? That lingered on for several weeks at Mike's house. You get in the car with the teenage son. Is I still can't figure it out. Makes no sense. And I'm like, I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm sure they'll explain later, right? And then we get another couple episodes, and no, it wasn't explained as
Really not until the start of the final episode did they give
right.
even a
Yeah,
passing mention of how that got undone.
but it was really good, fun TV, and it was great to see good, solid superhero content on the small screen again. It really was. I know people hated it, but I still hold strong. It was good, fun superhero TV. It really was.
Yeah, so I'll kind of use the greatest Western movie, in my opinion, as the template, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and kind of walk through those three things here. So the good of this show. Um, Charlie Cox is fantastic as Daredevil. I think Chris Reeves, Robert Downey Jr., and him, to me, are the three best casting choices I've ever seen for a guy playing a superhero. He
Yeah.
seems he's plucked right off the page. It's really hard to imagine anyone else even playing the character at this point. He just does such a good job in every single scene. When the material wasn't the best in this season, he still carried it and did a great job with it. Same for D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk. There is
Yes.
it's a little different than the comics for sure. The Netflix version was as well, but his there's enough there that it's recognizable, and he brings so much like strength to that character in every scene that he's in. I didn't love the way they wrote his relationship with his wife in this season, but that felt to me very much forced by the reshoots, in
Yeah.
that we knew at some point they recasted the wife, and so then it kind of felt that I think that was the most disjointed part of the season. I think those two actors have great chemistry with one another. The storyline wasn't the greatest, but I truly think that was just a part of the reshoots where they were probably going a very different direction and then had the last minute course correct. But his performance was great. John Bernthal as the Punisher, man, he is the MVP. As great as Cox is, Bernthal brings so much to every scene as Frank Castle. And that's the weirdest part I would say that was great with this show is anytime Daredevil and Punisher are on screen together, you almost feel bad for the other actors that Matt has to act off of because there's just another level of acting greatness in those and intensity that just isn't replicated anywhere else. And so I think the performances were fantastic. I thought, like you, the first episode was great, and I thought maybe the last three episodes were great. The middle, so that's the good for me. The bad of the show, Heather Glenn, his girlfriend, she's kind of an interesting comic book love interest as well, is the worst on-screen love interest I've ever seen. There was almost no chemistry with her and Matt the whole season. She's really oddly out of the loop on everything in Matt's life. And that like he's repeatedly telling her like Fisk is awful. And it's like you're dating and married or engaged to this guy or living with this guy. You know Fisk has tried to kill him multiple times. And you're like, I'm going to his ball. I'm going to his ball. Why aren't you coming with me?
Yeah.
They just and again, I think that was partially because maybe the reshoots, maybe originally they had no history with Fisk and Matt. I don't know what happened there, but the person who paid the most for it was Heather Glenn as a girlfriend, in that she was just needlessly antagonistic towards Matt, and that fell so flat throughout the whole show because we saw them build such a good relationship with him and Karen and with him and Elektra, even with him and with Claire, the nurse in the first season.
Oh
This
yeah.
one just felt so flat. And I felt bad for the actress because the material just gave her no chance to be likable. I think the other thing that really fell short, the new characters in the show. And again, I don't think it's any fault of the actress playing Kristen McDuffie or Cherry. They're just a poor replacement for Foggy and Karen. And so the whole time that chemistry of those three is missing. And because they hastily push those people away, it's almost worse that they ever mentioned Foggy and Karen. Because you're like, why did we send those great characters away for these other characters?
Well, I will say for the for McDuffie, who is it?
Yeah, like his partner in this show, the lawyer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
his partner in the show. There and you get a little flavor of the backstory of the character Cherry,
Yep.
and so you can kind of roll with it. But still, if you're gonna replace, and I know they were put on the spot there, but if you were going to replace characters like Karen and Foggy. We grew up with Karen and Foggy in the first three episodes. We kind of understood them. They had a lot of character development in the
On their
Netflix
own,
series.
even independent of Matt. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that all just added layers of gravitas and weight to the story in general. that was completely absent because these two characters were thrown in there, and they don't, we don't know anything about them really. We don't know enough about them to care like we do, like we care about Foggy and Karen.
Well, it almost reminded me of the Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens, where because Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher are in that movie, and R2D2 is in that movie, and C3PO is in that movie, any scene with them, you're like, I love these characters. I'm invested in them. When they
Yeah,
try to show you the new ones like Rey and Finn and those characters, you're like, why am I focusing on these ones? I don't care.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
nothing against the new actors. It's just when you have the charismatic old favorites that actually got you to watch, any scene where they're not in it, you have to do such a good job with the
No.
new characters. And they just didn't nail that. So I think that was the bad part is the Heather Glenn character was awful in the show, and I felt bad for the actress. They felt like they
Oh
gave her
yeah,
no
that
chance.
that
I think
relationship you could tell was probably forced because they had made the decision probably early on
it
that.
just turned into standard love interest number three kind of
Yeah,
thing in a comic book. And
and then
after
at the
Karen and Elektra and even Claire, it was like, man, this show used to do that stuff really well.
and then all of a sudden they're living together. And I'm like, what? What happened there?
Yeah, I think that would be the bad part for me was that I think the ugly portion of
there,
this.
there
I
was
think
no step up to that relationship from flirting to now we're
they would have
living
one
together.
scene where they're in a coffee shop, and all of a sudden it's like 1 year later, and they're like living together.
Yeah,
And that was I think the ugly portion of this show. If I have to get into what was bad, Disney to me massively mismanaged this. One, you can tell there was a different directorial team on episode one and episode 8 and 9. The rest all kind of feels like another show that would have moments peppered in, and that
yeah,
like it wasn't a bad episode, but the episode in the bank where he's working with Kamala Khan's dad or whatever,
yeah.
not a bad episode of TV.
No,
It's just nothing set. It was more like a CW show than the Netflix Daredevil, except for one scene at the end where Matt like smashes some guy's leg in half. And you're like, okay, so that seemed added in. So the tone was, I think the thing with Disney was you can mix and match things, but it kind of reminded me of like Justice League, and it wasn't as bad as Justice League. But if you remember the theatrical cut of Justice League, there was very clearly the Snyder scenes and then very
yeah,
clearly the Joss Whedon scenes.
yeah.
And those did not mix at all well. And while this isn't that bad, there are moments where it's like, okay, this was a different show
You
than the
could
other
tell.
one that I'm watching.
You
I
could
think the
tell.
other huge mistake Disney made, like you said, the why did Fisk get free? How did Fisk get out? That lingered over the entire season because they decided to connect this to Netflix.
Yeah,
Netflix gave us a great ending that wrapped up everything. The whole incredible speech from Charlie Cox of the I beat you, you're going to live
yeah,
the rest of your life in a cage, all that stuff. It all gets undone. Even Agent Nadim, who was such a good character in his sacrifice. We don't find out until a pass away line in episode 9 as to why. And it's like, I think Disney's mistake was you either needed that line to be in the beginning or you needed to make this a bingeable show. And I think that is the big thing is we were used to Daredevil being a bingeable show. This show was not good for a weekly release format because Matt was not Daredevil for I think a good 6 episodes in this show. And because you're watching 6 straight weeks in a row, like when is he going to put on the freaking costume? And we knew
yeah,
he was because
yeah,
the trailers had it in there. You just kept waiting. If you're binging it, you probably get through the episodes and go, okay, cool, it's building, it's building. When it's a week wait, and then another week wait, and then another week wait, at a certain point, you're just like, Matt, just put the darn costume on, man. And so I think that was a huge mistake. I think lastly, they pulled 2 characters out of the comics that they just disregarded really easily. Cole North, the cop who they ended up having be the guy who killed White Tiger, he's actually one of Daredevil's allies and a really good comic book character from Chip Zdarsky's run, who's a hero. To make him a corrupt cop villain who murdered White Tiger, it's like, okay, why did you use that? It's not a huge character, but it's kind of like if a Batman show would use like Bullock or Renee Montoya from the comic books, like not Gordon, but an ally of Batman's. And just like in this show, they're a villain and they're awful. And so that was a really weird choice that they made. And then Muse as a villain. There was a lot of build up to Muse, and then it was just done. It was like an
yeah.
episode and a half. And so I thought there was just a lot of disjointed stuff with that. What I will say, Mike, I think this is where we can kind of talk about where it did work. This show had an impossible task. The first three seasons of Netflix used a lot of the great Frank Miller stuff for it. The first season is largely the brilliant Man Without Fear Daredevil origin story from Miller and Romita. The second season is largely most of Frank Miller's works with Elektra and the Punisher in his main run. And
Yeah.
then the last season was basically Daredevil Born Again. You used kind of the all-time greatest hits of Daredevil in those three seasons.
Now what are
And
you
so
gonna do?
this season
Yeah.
had to borrow either from old Stan Lee, Bill Everett stuff or from the newer stuff like Zdarsky and Charles Soule. And while I think they did okay, there's definitely something missing, and it's because you were pulling from storylines that weren't quite as good as the ones that were before. Do you feel like maybe the first three seasons used so much of Daredevil's story that that's why this one suffered a bit, or how do you feel about that? Because that to me stood out as it was like, man, a lot of the source material had already been mined.
Well, it depends on who you got as the writer, because I will always maintain that with these iconic legacy characters, that there's no shortage of story material for a good writer to dig in there and get at. You've got great characters like Kingpin and Daredevil and Karen Page, and you can craft a new story absolutely. And the Punisher, oh my gosh, of course, and Bullseye lives again.
No, and
And
how many times
you
have the
can,
comics repeated the same things? Yeah.
yeah, and you could, with a good writer, I think, Netflix hit it out of the park because they were the first ones to tackle it. So yeah, they mined all the good stuff that made for easy work for the writers um, to go off some of those great comic book scripts, and there really were some great ones. And so, yeah, I think it had a high bar to reach, but hey, they went for it, and we love them for it. We're glad to have some Daredevil back. Like I said when I started the thing, there are some detractions, but overall, way better than anything
And
else on
anything we've
TV.
had. Yeah,
And,
and
and
I think that's a huge
you,
context point that you bring up.
you
That
gotta at least take that into consideration before you say, oh, I'm not watching anymore at all. I'll always be some superhero stuff on TV is better than no superhero stuff on TV because I come from a generation where there was none of this. I mean, until the Hulk came out in the '70s, there was and Wonder Woman. There was
yeah.
none of that on TV in my generation when I was a kid, and we were starstruck to have those shows on there, and they were arguably far worse than this one. But hey, I mean, we've got good TV. We've got good superhero stuff on TV now, and you got to be thankful for that. I think that this show, even with its shortcomings, and it had a Herculean task, and they went through rewrites, and they did some cast shuffling around. You could tell. I feel personally that Muse thing, it was a perfect CW like setup, and it felt CW, and it and
No, the
it.
whole Heather's her therapist. There was several storylines that didn't seem
I
Netflix
have a
quality.
I
Heather
have a
being the
feeling,
therapist for the Kingpin and his wife,
yeah. And
being the
Jackson and I were,
therapist for Muse. It's like every Daredevil villain goes to his girlfriend as a therapist.
yeah. And so the tropes were there, but Jackson and I had an ongoing thing where we break down episodes every week, and you could kind of tell what parts were from a different storyline. Would say, yeah, that probably felt like it was the original part of the original storyline, and I think they did kind of. Muse was probably meant to be a much bigger part of the story. I'm glad that they stopped what they were doing and decided to do the reshoots. I'm so glad they got Karen Page back, whoever that actress is, to be Karen Page, because she was amazing, and I hope to see more of her in season two. Sadly, unless they can resurrect Foggy, I think we'll always be standing on one and a half legs with this show because in my mind it'll be a little bit incomplete. I don't think it'll ever reach the heights of what the first season was, but like I said before, is way better than everything else that's on TV. Way better. And like
No,
we
it's a
are
great
poking,
point
we're
that you
poking
make.
sticks at it, but it's like it's only, it's easy to poke sticks at a show like this when the first iteration of it was so good. So I encourage everybody to please take it in context and understand, the greatness of what it is. Is it as great as the old one? No, but it is still darn good television watching, and I'm excited for season two.
I think the things they did, like you pointed out, we've had a lot of bad superhero television, and so just because this isn't as good as the Netflix show, it's still better than 90% of what we got. Compare this to almost every I mean, let's every CW season of Arrow, Flash. It's better than all of those. The
Yeah.
stuff like Titans, She-Hulk, Gotham. We've had a lot of bad TV shows. This is not a bad TV show. Are there an episode or two that are not great? Yeah, absolutely. I think especially episodes like 4 and 5 were a little weak. What I will say is, if your opening salvo is great, as this was, and your final two episodes are great, you've done enough to hook me to watch. And I think the last two episodes, when you get Karen back, when you've got Matt, when you've got Frank, when you up the ante on the action, the stakes, all of it, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go for the next season. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the great thing this show did is most of the time, if you can make a movie with an amazing opening and an amazing closing, you'll forgive the middle. And so I
Yeah.
think if you this show absolutely knocked that out of the park. I think the other part, like you mentioned, I'm hoping with Foggy that they pull what Ed Brubaker did. And it's a fake death. I don't care how forced it is. It absolutely was missing Foggy. The weirdest thing that I would have with the show, and again, I don't know how much of it's reshoots, some of it's actor availability. There was just weird choices that they made, and that like the plot line that would have very easily fit this show if you wanted no Foggy, no Karen. There's a time in the comic books where Matt is in San Francisco and he leaves Hell's Kitchen. Because Matt wasn't really a part of Kingpin's life anyway, you could have very easily had that after Foggy's death, Matt moves to San Francisco, works with Kristen and all these new people, and while he's gone, Kingpin is taking over New York City. It would have been comic accurate and it would have made a whole lot more sense. And that one of the things that was so annoying in the show is Matt's not being Daredevil, but he knows Fisk is evil. And he is seeing Fisk in power doing more, and he just doesn't do anything. And it's like that's so not Matt Murdock as it was in this show. And you could tell it was they wrote a different show. And so he
Yeah.
wasn't able to do anything because that wasn't the plot of the original first thing. And so that was the weirdest choice to me is like if you really wanted to nail this, like Fisk is taking control and there's no Foggy and Karen, have Matt go to San Francisco like he did in the comic books would have made a lot more sense. I think the other huge
Instead, they
missed
had
opportunity.
Karen went to San Francisco
Yeah,
for
so they do Karen, and I know in the books, Karen went out to the West Coast at one point before Born Again, but like it just the other part that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Karen's return made no sense in that there wasn't anything really grand enough that explained like why now Karen's back. Like the thing is like Karen, if she cared about Matt as much as they make her care about Matt, and we know she does, doesn't leave. Like that's the weirdest part, as you can tell, that was
yeah,
just they didn't handle that well enough. They just that was, oh man, we wrote her out of the show. How do we bring her back? And it's like they needed to find a better way to do that. But overall, look, I would say if I had to rank this, it's by far the worst season of this show, but it's still, I would say a B plus, an A minus, and it really only looks bad because the first couple seasons are incredible.
we're
It's kind of
good.
like I face this all the time as like we always use talk sports on here. As a Chicago Bulls fan, after the Michael Jordan era, there is no way anything's going to exceed that. There's no Bulls team that's ever coming that's going to be better than that era in my lifetime. I
Yeah,
need to just accept that when I watch the Bulls now, they may
yeah,
be good at times, they may be bad at times. It's never going to be that again. And I
no,
think that's what Daredevil is Daredevil is the Michael Jordan of superhero TV shows, in my opinion.
yeah,
It's not going to reach that, but that's okay. Like
right.
it's just got to approximate it, and I think there's enough here that it gives me hope for the next season. Really have a lot of hope for the Punisher special that they're doing. I think they're doing an hour long one with John Bernthal. That's going to be great. And I will say, I was very hopeful at the end where Daredevil's like, I'm gonna build a team. And he walks in. I am hoping that means we get Jessica Jones back. I am hoping that means we get Luke Cage back. I am hoping that means we get Iron Fist back. Elektra comes back. I think that'd be great. I think that would be really cool because we appear to be integrating the Netflix stuff. Then let's
Yeah.
bring back the Netflix stuff. Because those other shows, those other characters, they certainly deserve a second shot. I think those were all so well executed and done well. I'd be really excited to see that come back and actually capitalize on what they could do with that story.
What do we know about the second season? What's
So I think all we know about the second season for sure is we know obviously Matt and Fisk are back. Karen is supposedly part of the cast full time. There is people saying Foggy is back in season two, but that's not clear if it's flashbacks or if they're actually bringing him back. And there are rumors they've contacted some of the actors who played the original Defenders characters. So I think if they come back, even if you got like what was her name, Rosario Dawson, Claire, the night nurse character back, just bring back some of those characters, and I think the show will start to feel a little more in alignment with what we want it to be. And that the weirdest thing I'll never understand why Disney decided at any point, let's bring back Cox, let's bring back D'Onofrio, but we can leave Karen and Foggy to the side. It's like you knew you needed these guys back. Why you had the arrogance though to go, we don't need those two characters. It's like who was watching that show that was like, we have to keep Cox and we have to keep D'Onofrio, but the other people are expendable.
you
It's
know?
just a very weird decision that really set them back for this season.
I think in a vacuum, like if you were in the room with the production people and they're like, well, we have this budget and we're going to do this show. And I think probably early on, some of the writing, it was directed, well, let's see which kind of show you can write without Karen and Foggy, because I don't know if we can get them back. And I think they probably greenlit that and went with it. And then you can tell because they act, and how often does that happen where they stop production? But in that moment, you don't know. You're just reading, black and white words on a paper, and you've been mandated to like, this is the way we're thinking we're going to go with this show. And 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 sometimes it just takes for it to come out for you to realize like, oh, we made a mistake. And most of the time they will just muscle through it and say, you take your medicine, you get what you get, and don't throw a fit. And but this time they course corrected, which I think is very admirable, because
They
so many.
deserve a lot of credit for recognizing and actually being willing to spend the extra
Yeah,
money to make sure they at least gave it a shot.
yeah,
Um,
and I think that was a wise choice, because if it had come out half baked, like and ended up looking like a CW show, people would have fell by the wayside. But I think that they have captured enough of the original fans of the show, and they've hooked enough of the Disney viewers to where it'll have a strong second season. I hope.
Hopefully, I mean, at least we know we're getting a second season. I think the weirdest thing that this show is going to face, the environment around superhero shows and superhero entertainment has massively changed since Netflix ended. In that, you go back to when Netflix was there, everybody was basically on board with the MCU. Everybody loved where it was. Everybody was happy. We have had this entire kind of subculture get created of MCU haters at this point, and largely that's Disney's fault. Disney
Yeah,
has made a lot of stuff and a lot of decisions that haven't made sense. They've pushed a lot of stuff into these shows that didn't need to be there. They've made choices like let's not use the actual Silver Surfer and stuff like that. And so Disney earned a lot of the scorn they're getting. Some of it's overblown by people who are opportunistic and look to hate everything. But I think that's the other part that Daredevil is going to face that it didn't originally is when these shows first came out, because it was a binge thing, it was on Netflix, you got the whole season at the whole time. You didn't really judge individual episodes in a vacuum. It was with Netflix, so it didn't really have all the Disney haters that we have, which again, Disney's earned a lot of those. I think that's the hard part this show is going to face is there is an entire market full of people now who are going to watch this for the explicit reason of how can I make this look bad? And again, it deserves some of that, but I do think that's been overblown a bit with this show because it is overall a good season of television. And I do hope people who maybe got put off by the first few episodes, I think if you give it time and you finish it and you watch the end, you'll love where it ends up and where it's going to go. But let us know. What do you guys think below? Did you get a chance to watch this show? Did you like season 1 of Daredevil Born Again? Do you agree with us, disagree with us? Again, we're just two guys sitting here giving our opinions. We will not pretend we're like cinematography experts or writing experts or anything like that. Just two folks giving our opinions. Let us know what you think, folks. Thank you, as always, for watching. God bless you. You have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.